We talked about this last time about narcissism. Narcissus was a very attractive man, and Aphrodite fell in love with him, and so Aphrodite wanted to marry him, but he had never seen himself. He didn't know how pretty he was. And somehow he looked into a pond or a river and saw his reflection, and he fell in love with himself. And he literally starved to death because he was so pretty he couldn't take his eyes off himself.
I can relate.
That's why I don't have so many mirrors in my house. I'd never get anything done. Okay. Anyway, so that was Narcissus. So narcissism is still in the DSM-5. Narcissism, people that focus so much on themselves that they don't care about anybody else, and that's part of the problem with narcissism. The other problem with narcissism is that we are becoming more and more narcissistic. Once upon a time, you couldn't take a picture of yourself. There was no such thing as a selfie because cameras were a lot more intricate than they are today. Now they're telephones. Oh, I left my telephone in my office. Whoops. Anyway, well, nobody's going to call me anyway. Now that we can take selfies, of course, narcissism has become more and more prevalent. The other thing is that with MySpace and Facebook and Instagram and all the tweeting and twittering that people are doing, we're so ingrained in our own lives that we can't pay attention to anybody else. How about that? I guess and it's getting worse. It's getting worse and worse. And of course they did studies looking at narcissism and looking at the music that people are listening to, and what they discovered was that people are getting more and more narcissistic. The top red line shows average scores for college students on the narcissistic personality inventory. Really? They've got a narcissistic personality inventory. Wouldn't that be a lot of fun to take? A common measure of narcissism. This is from the years 1980 to 2008. As you can see, it slowly crept up from 1980. It actually went down until the internet was invented, and then all of a sudden it just shot up. The bottom blue line shows the percentage of first-person pronouns, I, me, or mine, in the lyrics of the 10 most popular songs of the year from 1980 to 2007. And as you can see, the music that people were listening to was more narcissistic as well. Somebody's got to do studies about music, because music really tells you how to act. It really does, and people actually believe that stuff. You listen to music that communicates with you. So if it's a love song or whatever, or maybe it's a, bust a cap in somebody's ass or something like that. I mean, people actually listen to that stuff, and they actually do that stuff. When my son was working in a bar in Hollywood, somebody came out with rap music that had to do with rolling a blunt on the bar. And people would come up and try to roll a blunt on his bar. Well, that's illegal. For one thing, marijuana was illegal at the time in California. And smoking inside a bar is illegal in California. So of course, you can get arrested. Well, they could be fined. Everybody could get arrested for not controlling that type of behavior. So of course, my son's running around like a security guard. He's a bartender, but he's running around like a security guard, making sure that these dumb people didn't roll blunts on his bar. And anytime they did, what he would do, he would confiscate it. He'd grab it away from him, and he would spray Windex on it, which evidently destroys marijuana. I have no idea. it was his idea anyway. And he got in a bunch of fights because of this. He's small like I am, but he's got like shoulders to here. So he's not the kind of person you want to mess with. Anyway, and he had to learn to defend himself in California just to get along, as weird as that is. So the narcissism is increasing. It has been increasing over a long period of time. The music that we listen to is more and more narcissistic. I think who's the lady that was country and western, now she's pop. Taylor Swift. That's it. Okay. Yeah. Talk about narcissistic music. All she talks about is breaking up with her boyfriends. Is she engaged now, or is she married? Is she with somebody? I feel so sorry for Taylor. Don't you?
No.
She's in such pain. You can hear it in her music. I never listen to her music. What I'm talking about. Okay. Anyway, okay. So we have our social self. It's made up of the roles that we play. If we're a parent, of course, that is a very important role. If we're a student, that's a very important role. And of course, your extended family member. And the weird thing is that you can be the most responsible parent in the whole wide world, and then you go home to visit your parents, and all of a sudden you're a little kid again. You feel like a little kid again. And your kids will notice it. They say, "Dad, what's wrong? Why are you acting that way?" Well, my dad's in charge of me now all of a sudden. I was teasing my grandson the other day. What were we talking about? Oh, we were arguing as to which one of us was cutest, whether he was cuter than I was, or whether I was cuter than he was. And so he is cute. He's a really cute kid. As a matter of fact, I have some pictures. I'll show you how cute the little shit is. But anyway, we were just playing. I mean, it was just a joke. So he said, "Mom, am I the cutest?" And I said, "She has to say that I'm the cutest because I'm her dad and I told her to." And so that's what she said. It was a joke, but he got all upset about it because I'm cuter than he is. I know that doesn't upset you that much, but it is very upsetting for a child not to be cuter than his grandfather. Anyway, extended family, student, parent, we have roles that we play, and we've talked about this before, that when you're in a different environment, you act differently. And of course, that's because you're taking on a new role. You're never the same person in every environment. I was just thinking about this. I just got news that one of my friends is leaving. He's not going to be here after the middle of March. So he's from Oklahoma. And I used to live in Oklahoma. As a matter of fact, I lived in Oklahoma for 4 years. And I was just thinking about every time I visit Oklahoma, it feels differently because Oklahoma used to be Indian territory. They used to call it Indian territory. And they shipped all the Indians from back east, they shipped them all to Oklahoma and Kansas and Nebraska. That used to be, they kind of kicked them out of the east and they moved them west. But there's a lot of different tribes in Oklahoma. It's really kind of cool. Well, it's not that cool, I guess. But it's really kind of different. But I used to work in Chandler, Oklahoma, which is right next door is Stroud, Oklahoma, which is the home of the Sac and Fox tribes. Now the interesting thing about that is that I live in Iowa now, and that's where they originally came from, and half of them didn't move, half of them stayed up there. So there's, I ran into Sac and Fox down in Oklahoma, I ran into the Fox up in the Meskwaki, up in Iowa. It's kind of interesting. But if you look at the two different groups, they're completely different. One of them wears ribbon shirts, the others are more Plains Indians, and they wear more buckskin. They dance differently. Down south everybody dances counterclockwise. And up north they they dance in a figure eight. It's the oddest thing in the world. I'd never seen anything like that. It looks like a snake, them dancing around. But the deal is they have to cross each other. And so when they have an intertribal, you know, you're always seeing people. Sometimes they shake hands and sometimes they just dance past each other. Why am I talking about this? Oh, I feel differently in Oklahoma, I guess that was my point. Social identity, each individual identifies themselves by their extended social roles. We're all Americans, and of course you don't realize you're an American until they put a uniform on you and they send you off to shoot somebody. Then you recognize the fact that you're an American. Your identity may be very strong as far as being a church member or being an ethnic group member, but one of the things that the military does, it teaches you that everybody is an American. And that's the person who's going to save your life, the person that's right beside you. And your job is to save their lives. And they become very important to you no matter who they are, no matter what ethnic group they are, no matter what church group they are from. It doesn't really matter. They've got your back and you've got their back. And that's really an interesting message to get. Because we think, I mean, you're here on the reservation, you're thinking, you know, you're talking to Wilson, and Wilson is giving you all this stuff about the Dene people, but then you wander off to join the military, and all of a sudden you're not Dene anymore. You are, but you're not. You can be Dene on the inside, but you can't be Dene on the outside, because you have to be a corporal or a sergeant or whatever, private. You have to be a member of the military. So they take all that out of you almost right away. Once upon a time, the United States military was segregated. This wasn't that long ago. Well, it was as far as you're concerned, but it wasn't as far as I'm concerned. During World War II, it was segregated, and they lost so many men. They were moving so fast across France. The Germans were retreating. They landed at D-Day. Once they broke out, the Germans were in retreat, and they were chasing them. And they chased them all the way into Germany, almost all the way into Germany. They chased them into Belgium. And they got stuck at the Hurtgen Forest, which is a really thick forest, right beside the Ardennes. And they got stopped, and they were stopped for months, a couple months, all the way to the Battle of the Bulge. But they lost all these men, and so all of a sudden they were hungry for men, and of course they were sending troops over all the time, but not enough. So one of the things that they had to do, they had to integrate the force. They had to allow, before that they wouldn't allow African Americans to fight, to be combat troops, and after that, of course, they allowed them to be combat troops. But of course that was only from December of 1944 until April, because the war ended in April of 1945. Anyway, ethnic groups, real important stuff. But being an American, of course, is really important. You may ask yourself, why in the world did all those Navajo code talkers join the Marines? Why have all these Native peoples join the United States military? Why did what was I reading yesterday? I was reading about, wait a minute. I was reading about The Long Walk is what I was reading about. And they were talking about the tribes that were scouted for Kit Carson. Sorry. It wasn't just Kit Carson. You know that, right? You know it wasn't just Kit Carson. And one of the reasons that they had a really hard time finding you guys. I don't know if they tell you that story. I mean, they came and they were looking for people, and they'd only found like 300, and most of them were either old men or women who were just giving birth, and they couldn't find anybody, and course, then they decided, well, the only way that we can win this thing is to destroy all your food, and that's what they did. They destroyed all your food. But they had scouts that were not white. They were native scouts. But don't feel bad about the Apache scouting against you, because you guys scouted against the Apache too. So that was later on, but that's okay. Why are we talking about this? Oh, we're talking about being American. Anyway, okay. Social comparisons. In order to understand where we are in the world, individuals must compare themselves to other people in the society, and that's what we do. One of the problems is we don't really know most of the people in our society. The people that we do know are people like us, people that live where we live. Those are the people that we know. The people that we don't know are the people that are able to isolate themselves. Now, who are these people? Well, if we're middle class, we probably have very little interaction with people that are poor, people that live in poverty. If we are middle class, we probably have very little interaction with people that are very wealthy. You never come in contact with these people. They don't come in contact with you. And there's a reason for that. It's because they get to live wherever the hell they want to live. And they can pay for just about anything. So they get to live wherever they live. I went to a school that was one of the elite schools. Wealthy people went to this school. And because of that, I ran into people that had lots and lots of money. I ran into people that had lots and lots of money and didn't really have to get an education. So they kind of just sloughed off. And people gave them their grades, or they bought their grades, as strange as that may seem. I went to a school with a guy that was, whose father owned most of the newspapers in Indiana. And that guy was the biggest bum you ever wanted to meet. He eventually became vice president of the United States. This deadhead idiot that was gone half the time, sailing his boat around some lake somewhere. It was a yacht club. He was a member of the yacht club. Of course, I've got one pair of shoes, and I'm running track so that I can get a second pair of shoes, that kind of stuff. And here, this guy's got all the money in the world, never goes to class, never has to worry about anything. I went to school with a guy that came to school with 2 cars. I didn't have any car, of course, but he came to school with 2 cars. One was a Shelby Cobra, which you guys probably, that's a really old car. Nice car though, little sports car. And the other was a Ferrari. He had a Ferrari and a Shelby Cobra. And he gave his roommate the other car. So he drove one car and his roommate drove the other car. I was walking to a fraternity party one time, and I was talking to this guy, and he said, "Yeah, I brought my Ferrari out." And I'm thinking, "What? I don't have any car, and this guy's got a Ferrari, really?" Anyway, we couldn't even communicate. We didn't even understand the same things. He wanted to be isolated, and of course I'm trying to meet people, and he didn't understand that at all. Anyway, so we compare ourselves with the people that were around. And of course we get into arguments from time to time, because we're not only comparing abilities, who you are, but we're also comparing opinions. And of course that's where Fox News comes in conflict with MSNBC and CNN, because they're liberal stations and Fox News is conservative stations. Some people repeat one thing and some people repeat the other. So we're constantly comparing our opinions. Whose opinion is the most important in the United States? Who's right? Is Fox News or CNN right? Which one's right? It all depends on what you watch as to which one is true. Why is money so important? Why doesn't somebody from the reservation run for president of the United States? I mean, they've got, the Democrats have 10 people in the race right now. Well, Joe Biden kind of joined last night. What's the difference between them and us? You, me, not me. I'm too old. No, wait a minute. Joe Biden's older than I am. Trump's older than I am. Oh, God, Bernie Sanders is 77 years old. I'm only 70. I feel like a pup. I could run. I should run. Why can't I run for president? Yeah, there we go. Francis will vote for me. Why can't I run for president?
Money.
No money, exactly. You got to have money. So money is important. Has anybody paid their taxes yet? My wife just paid her taxes yesterday. We had to pay more in taxes this year than we did last year. Don't you remember when they were screaming that we would get a tax break, just like the middle class? This is a middle class tax break. Remember when they passed the new tax laws? Oh, shit. We paid $1,500 more than we did last year. They took away some of our deductions. So we had to pay more money. They took away middle class deductions, and they got rid of some of the things that the wealthy people had to pay. These guys are making billions and billions of dollars. And I had to, some of it's my money, $1,500 of it's my money. That's not fair. Why shouldn't wealthy people pay taxes, higher taxes? Why should I support? No. I don't. My wife really doesn't mind paying taxes. She figures it's part of her. You know, she's got a pension from the Air Force, so she's paying herself. Success and failure, self-concept is strongly affected by whether we are successful in what we attempt. If we are unsuccessful, we will lose our self-esteem. But of course, when we think of ourselves, we try to remember all the good things. We try to forget all the bad things. I fart too much. That's not one of the things you think about. I'm tall and handsome. That's one of the things. That's not me. Other people's judgments when our achievements are recognized, that builds our self-esteem. So we like people to compliment us. We're trying to improve our self-concept. We compare ourselves to others to gain information and to provide motivation. I need to swear less. Nobody else swears in class. I'm the only one that swears. I know. The only one that swears. None of your other instructors swear, do they? I'm the only one. So I need to work on that. I'm comparing myself with other individuals, and that's my motivation. Because if I swear too much, Sue's going to just be pissed off. I can't talk about sex because Sue's going to be pissed off. People who make you feel good about yourself are either less competent than you are at something important to you. This, of course, is through social comparison, or more talented than you at something irrelevant to your self-concept. I had a lot of friends when I was running track, but they weren't the guys that ran the same races that I did. I was really good friends with the high jumper. Well, I can't jump at all. We were pals. The people that ran my race, I wasn't that friendly with those guys. But the people that ran other races, the pole vaulter was a good friend of mine. The hurlers were good friends of mine. The sprinters were good friends of mine because I was a middle distance runner. So I liked the sprinters okay. Now, interestingly, I joined the sprint relay team. 400-meter relay team, and I didn't have to compete with anybody because I was the fourth fastest guy on the team, so I got to run. Anyway, so social comparison. So we like people that are good at things but not good at the same things that we are, because we feel that they are competing with us. Competition is really, 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 really important. Competition can really strain a relationship if you're competing with somebody. If you think about it. Depending on where and how you were raised determines your view of yourself. I was raised on a farm in Indiana. The farms in Indiana are nothing like the farms around here. Things actually grow out there really well. We get a lot of rain, so things grow pretty well. The fields are fairly small. They're only about 20-acre fields. And that's what I did. We raised pigs. Well, my neighbor raised pigs. We didn't raise any pigs. And he raised livestock. When I was young, he used to milk cows. He had 3 Holsteins and 2 Jerseys and a Guernsey. If you wanted to, he'd let you milk the Holsteins because the milk comes out like water. Actually, it looks like water. But the Jersey and the Guernseys, milk doesn't come out quite as easy. You have to squeeze a little bit harder. People raised in the Western culture tend to be more individualistic than people raised in Eastern cultures. People that are raised in Eastern cultures are more collectivistic. So they have a different mindset. People in the United States, of course, we're individuals. We're individualists. We have a Facebook page. And on our Facebook page, we brag about stuff. Oh, yeah, I went and ate at Denny's last night. How perfect was that? And the food was almost edible. But people in Asia, of course, they had a Facebook page. They have a picture of their class. They'd have a picture of their village. They wouldn't have pictures of themselves, potentially. And that's the difference. As confusing as it may seem, people can be individualistic in some aspects of their lives and collectivistic in others. A good example is politics. This is Mort. He's adamantly conservative. This basically means that he was economically individualistic, but morally a collectivist. Really? Okay. Which means that economically he thinks he wants free trade. He believes in free trade. But as far as society is concerned, he wants everybody to have the same set of morals that he does. So as far as the society is concerned, he is collectivistic. He wants everybody to be exactly the same. Maybe he even wants them to be white. One of the problems we've had in the United States, and one of the problems with the melting pot idea, is that the idea that everybody wants to be white. So they teach everybody to be white or to act white. How about that? That was the whole idea behind assimilation. Forcing people to act like them. That's assimilation. So they try to force you to be white or to act white. And the assumption is that everybody wants to be just like that white guy out there. They want you to make a lot of money. And this is one of the things that Trump tied into during the 2016 election. The idea that he was just like everybody else. That's what he tried to tell the white population, and that they needed to vote for him, and it worked. What's the percentage of white people in the United States? Anybody know? 50%? More like 70%. Yeah, it's more like 70%. Anyway, so there's a lot more white people out there, and there were a lot of white people who were pissed off because Obama was black. I don't know if you remember that, but Obama's not white. And they were upset about that. They were upset about the fact that they elected a president who was not white. And the next time around, they were going to go the opposite way. This is like the pendulum swinging from liberal to conservative. It just swung way, way conservative. And of course, that's what we're running into right now. The whole thing about the wall and immigration. We've never had this vicious a fight about immigration, but all of a sudden, he wants to build the wall and he declares an emergency. It's really kind of fascinating to watch if you're a political scientist, which I am, as it turns out. Of course, Mort is economically conservative. which means that, or economically individualistic. He believes in free trade, that we shouldn't have any government strictures on anything, and he's morally collectivistic. His liberal neighbor is the very opposite. He's a socialist. You're going to hear a lot of talk about socialism. Socialism is the economic theory behind communism, where people take their money and they dump it into a big pile and everybody takes out the same amount. That's the idea behind socialism. But of course, the United States could never be socialistic. We won't go into that. Anyway, so his neighbor is the opposite of him. Self-efficacy is the sense that we are competent and effective in our lives. If I didn't feel like I was doing a good job teaching, I wouldn't be here. If I didn't feel like I was giving you guys good information, I'd leave and let somebody else teach. Somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about. And this is self-efficacy. If I didn't feel like I was competent, I wouldn't be doing this job. Research on self-efficacy and health shows that people who felt competent and effective in their lives were more persistent, were less anxious, were less depressed, more healthy, and more academically successful. Self-efficacy. People who have self-efficacy tend to set more challenging goals, to persist in the face of difficulty, to predict productivity, that they will always be productive, to keep calm and seek solutions when problems arise. One of the problems with teaching when you're 70 years old is that you don't have as much energy as you used to. I'm okay as long as I'm in class, but when I get out of class, I go back to my office and I don't take a nap. But I don't do anything. I just kind of sit there and read my emails, and I don't get anything done. Especially right in the middle of the semester. It's like I can't get the engine started or something. My lectures are okay, I guess. Kind of. They're almost okay. But I just can't do anything. Sometimes I can't grade. So I'm having that problem right now. So if it takes me a couple weeks to get things done, you know what's going on. Yeah. But I feel competent, and I feel pretty good. I usually do okay. So I keep telling the same stories. Poor Denise is sitting there, and she hears the same stories from one class to the next, and of course it puts her to sleep, and that's kind of tragic. Individuals with self-efficacy keep calm and seek solutions when problems arise. They striving plus persistence equals accomplishment. As long as you try and you're persistent at it, eventually, of course, you will be successful. With accomplishment, of course, self-confidence grows. Self-efficacy grows with hard-won achievements. So the more frequently that you get things done, the more you'll feel like you can get things done. One of my skills, and I'm still okay, I'm pretty good at it, is drawing blood. I'm really good at drawing blood. The reason I'm good at drawing blood is because I'm confident that no matter who sticks their arm out, I'm going to be able to get blood out of that rock or that turnip. It doesn't really matter how small your veins are. I've got the steadiness to be able to go in there and hit that vein. Now there's a bit of a trick to it if you think about it, because your veins are inside. You can see them kind of, you can feel them. But in order to draw blood from somebody, you have to take a needle and you have to stick it inside that vein. And you have to know exactly where that vein is. And you have to seat that needle in the vein so that blood will come out of it. If you pull too hard, of course, it will collapse the vein and you won't get any blood. So this is the trick. You have to stick it through the skin, you have to go into the vein, and you have to seat it so that the bevel of the needle, it's got an angled point. The bevel of the needle is completely open so that when you draw back, you'll be able to draw blood. I know that sounds complicated, but I've been doing it for 50 years, so I'm really pretty good at it. I can draw just about anybody.
I like to see the flash.
What flash?
The blood comes in.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, isn't it? No, I hit it. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I used to draw blood with 23 gauge needle, which is not the easiest thing in the world. I drew a guy one time from his thumb, the vein on top of his thumb.
Wow.
Yeah, it was worse than that because I had to draw coag studies, and you can't traumatize the blood at all. So I had to pull back really slow, and it has to be a steady, even flow so that you can get the coag studies out of it. Anyway, from the top of his thumb. That was about 20 minutes before he died. And I don't know why they were doing coag studies on a guy that's died. Sometimes they torture people before they die. That sound good, does it? Doctors, they're always ordering things. Anyway, that was my job. And I was good at it. So I have all of this self-efficacy all this confidence that I'm going to be able to get the blood. I was living up in Montana, and one of the groups, of course there's natives up there, but they have pretty good veins, and you don't have to worry about those guys. The individuals that you had to worry about were the Hutterites. The Hutterites are, has anybody ever heard of the Hutterites before? Okay, it's a religious group like the Amish or the Mennonites or the Moravians. They're Anabaptists. Anyway, they're inbred. Can I say that? There were 11 men, and they married 11 women, and then and nobody else can come into the group except that original 11 men and 11 women. So they literally are inbred. There's 11 names. Hoffman was the name of my group. So everybody in this colony was named Hoffman, and they have to marry people out of their colony. So they marry somebody from another colony, the Huffs or I can't remember the other names, but everybody was Hoffmans where we were. But they have to marry somebody from another colony, which doesn't really, the genes, they've only been mixing these 11 different genetic structures for like 300 years. They've got the most god-awful veins you can possibly imagine. Just horrible. And every once in a while you'll hit one that has good veins, but almost all of them are just horrible. The other thing that happens to them is they have concave chests, so that instead of their chest sticking out, the chest dip in. Their sternum is embedded. Oh, jeez. So their circulation isn't very good. It's really kind of weird. Interesting group.
Aren't you have to have a minimum of 23 different groups of partners to have at a minimum?
Well, that's logical, but they've been doing this for 300 years, and there's still only 22 different genetic structures.
So that would be 23 would be
One more.
46 people at minimum.
Yeah.
From different families.
Exactly.
They only have 11.
11 and 11, yeah. It started out with 11 and 11. I know, it's nuts. It's crazy. Let's see, how does that work? Women, no. Men can join the colony, but women can't. Yeah, but men, of course, don't join the colony. Sometimes people leave the colony and go off. I had a neighbor that was a Hutterite. He was married to a lady that wasn't Hutterite, so he had to leave the colony. Couldn't live on the colony. It was weird. They're really nice people. They're thieves, but they're nice people. They'll steal your blind. You leave your rake out, and all of a sudden it's gone, and you know who took it. So you go to the colony, and there's your rake. Somebody's, and they're passing it back and forth to use it up. It's really weird. They're a strange group. They're a group of people, when they go into Walmart, they follow them around to try to make sure that they don't steal anything. They're really good at it, though. They still steal stuff. It sounds like gypsies, doesn't it? Yeah.
Where's this at?
This is in Montana. They live in Montana and Canada. It's the southern portion of Canada. They're really good farmers. Really nice people. I mean, they're nice people. Punch in the face. But if they don't want to talk to you, they pretend they don't understand what you're talking about because they speak German, not English. English is their third language. Anyway, they're fun. Anyway, I was able to get their blood, which was a bit of a trick. So they would only come in if I was drawing blood. So we had these, I was teaching at the same time, so sometimes I would go and I'd work at the health fairs. And if I was there, then all the Huterites had come in. Oh my God, well, I've got to stick all these people. You know, and I'm sticking them in the back of the hand and in the wrist. You know, most people have pretty good veins on top of their hands or in their wrists. But they, oh, it's just horrible. Just the worst veins you ever saw. Research dealing with self-efficacy of the older adults found that when given positive images of being older adults in the West actually did better on memory tests than those who were given negative images. If you tell me, oh, you're 70 years old, you must be dumb as dirt. If you keep telling me that, eventually I'm going to start believing you. And of course you give me the statistics that say, tell me how stupid I am. Eventually I'm going to believe you. And that's the way it works in the West. We don't see, now we are, if you watch the right channels on television, then you get to see commercials with old farts wandering around and doing things. But if you're watching regular television, it's all young kids. It's all puppies. It's all babies. And all you babies are out there on television. You know, oh, we have to make our fingernails pretty, and we need lipstick that won't come off, and our hair has to be shiny or sheeny or something. I have no idea. Anyway, and of course, old people, my hair's getting thin. I was walking down I was walking past the building the other day, and a drop hit me right on the bald spot. Now, normally, if a drop hits your hair, it doesn't, you know, it just gets stuck in your hair. But this stuff like ran all, I mean, it was like an egg, and it broke, and it just ran all over my head. I was so pissed. It hit my bald spot, right in the middle of my bald spot. And I know it's there, but I can't see it. If I look in the mirror, it's behind me, so I'm going, oh, good. My hair looks great today. I can't see my bald spot. In order to see my bald spot, I have to take a mirror, and I have to look in the mirror to look at the other mirror so that I can see my hair, the back of my head. I didn't even know you could do that until my wife does that with her hair. So that she can see the back of her head to make sure that it looks good. Okay. I never even thought about it before. It's pretty stupid. In Asia, where positive images prevail, memory decline is less acute. Now, either Asians are a lot smarter than we are, or they're not given any bad information, and they're not accepting bad information. Feeling of competence is not the only factor of success. An individual must also feel that they have control over the outcome of their fate to be successful. Locus of control is the second factor in predicting success. Locus of control is the extent to which people perceive outcomes as internally controllable by their own efforts and actions, or as externally controlled by chance or outside forces. So if you feel like you have no control, if you're in a job where you feel like you have no control, then it's going to be far more stressful for you than if you're in a job where you get to control your own fate, where you get to make decisions. It's one of the reasons I like to teach. It's one of the reasons that when Sue complained about what was going on last year, it really pissed me off. Because she was interfering in my class. We had already discussed what we needed to talk about. And we had already discussed that. And she came in and told us we shouldn't be doing that. And that upset me. Because she tried to take control of my class. She was trying to tell me what I could teach and what I couldn't teach. And I thought that was incorrect. All right. But I didn't like it. Denise and I figured out what needed to happen. We talked about it, and we got an agreement in the class, and we were taking care of business, weren't we? And now, potentially, we will teach that human sexuality class, which should be interesting. It should be very interesting. It's a counseling class. We're going to teach it as a counseling class. Anyway, I think I've convinced Dr. Lerman we need to do that. But Sue's just going to have a fit. She's already having a fit.
When is that class?
I'm sorry?
If you're gonna actually do that class?
What, human sexuality?
Yeah. Is it
Uh,
still in the process or is it?
Right, yeah, well, it's already on the books. They've been teaching human sexuality here since the 90s.
Oh.
Yeah, but nobody teaches it because everybody's scared of it. Now, they're not scared of sex. What they're scared of is, Emory going, oh, you can't talk about that. Boys and girls can't talk about that together. That's what they're afraid of. So we've been juggling this thing, trying to figure out how to do it. And I think Denise and I figured out how to do it. So we're okay. Thanks, Denise.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay, so what's going on in Albuquerque? Big trial right now. They've got a father that's being tried for prostituting his daughter. His daughter's 7. How could he do that? He must be the worst person in the world. No, he's a drug addict, and that's how he makes his money so that he can buy his drugs. What's more important, your daughter or your drugs? What? Daughter or drugs? He's a white guy. You guys can't figure out what the hell's going on. Anyway, so this is what's going on with this little girl. She turns out that her father was prostituting her. So, and that's what the news story was the first day of the trial. Father prostitutes daughter, or father on trial for prostituting daughter. And then they talked about it. She testified yesterday, and so they were showing parts of her testimony. They didn't show her face, of course. She's only 8 years old. But there's a kicker to this whole thing. So, I mean, if the dad is prostituting his daughter out of a motel room, what are the other factors in this? Who should be trying to protect this little girl? Not the guys that are having sex with the little girl, probably, or the women. It turns out she had sex with both men and women.
Well, the mother's set to go to trial in 2020.
The mother. And that was the question. They keep talking about how horrible this father is and all this horrible stuff that his father did. Well, where's the mother? Is there a mother involved in this whole thing? Do we know?
I don't know.
We saw her yesterday. The mother is on trial too. She was arrested for 3 counts. Father was arrested for 5 counts, but she wasn't arrested for prostituting her daughter. However, I read another news story from another station, and they said that the mother was prostituting the child as well. I assumed that there was no mother. Wouldn't she protect her daughter? Well, wait a minute. We had that one lady that actually sold her daughter to her boyfriend, and then he raped and murdered the daughter and chopped her up. Remember that clip? Oh, I'm glad you didn't hear that one. That was horrible. That was a couple of years ago. But yeah, there's a mother involved, and she's being tried for child abuse because she's the one that hits the daughter. Evidently, she's the one that hits the daughter. Okay, wow, this is kind of a weird family, isn't it? I hope. I hope it's a weird family. It's worse. There's a brother. Well, maybe this isn't worse, because nothing was going on with the brother. But the brother was there. There were 2 kids in the family, and the brother is a year older than the daughter. So he's 9 now. Of course, they were prostituting him, but there's, the more you read, the more you find out, wow, this is a really dysfunctional group, isn't it? The father was looking for drugs, the mother was using drugs, the daughter explained how weed works. You take a piece of paper, and you fold it in fourths, and then you tear it, and then you can smoke your weed, and you put your weed inside the paper. That's how it works. And she knew how it worked because she had watched her mother and her father smoke weed I know. Okay, so the reason I even mention this is because we're talking about learned helplessness. Studies with dogs back in the 70s with Seligman showed that when confronted with a persistent negative situation where the creature had no means of escape, the creature would remain paralyzed even when escape was possible. And this is the structure that he created. These were grids that had electric wiring in it. And they were electrocuting the dog, and the dog was crying and urinating on itself. And it wanted to leave, but they wouldn't let it leave. Even when they opened up an escape route, the dog would not leave. The dog had been conditioned, the dog had learned that it couldn't escape, so it didn't escape. Even if it had a means of escape, it didn't escape. And this is known as learned helplessness. Unfortunately, humans do the same thing. Evidently, that's what was going on with the little girl. The little girl potentially could have gone to school, and she could have told her teacher, she could have told the school nurse, she could have told anybody. She could have gone to anybody and complained, "Dad's making me have sex with adults so that they can get drugs." The thing that upset her the most was her dad was making her steal men's wallets. So she was having sex with the men, and when they were sleeping or when they were finished, she was going and she was stealing their money. And she didn't like that. The sex part, she didn't really complain about that part. The part she complained about the most was the fact that her father made her steal. And she knew that was wrong. Now, of course, if she'd been raised to think that that 7-year-old girl, it's okay for a 7-year-old girl to have sex with an adult, right? If that's what she was taught. And of course, this is another form of learned helplessness. Eventually, she's going to learn from society that this isn't right. One of the reasons that they discovered that she was being prostituted was because she was coming to school with poor hygiene. She was also coming to school dressed provocatively or inappropriately. She was wearing high heels, she had makeup on, she was wearing clothes, revealing clothes, which of course there's nothing to reveal in this case. In this case, anyway, this is known as learned helplessness, and we see this all the time. Anybody can get into one of these kinds of relationships. I had a colleague when I was teaching at Mississippi University for women, smart lady, brilliant person. She was my colleague. We were the psychology department. She and I were the two people teaching psychology. And of course, I was teaching everything that I teach. Almost everything that I say today is what I was saying back in 1995 as well. Really neat lady, just really neat lady. A little bitty, she was about my height, a little bit shorter than I am, but her husband was like 6'5", and he weighed like 300 pounds. This guy was a solid person. And she made a lot more money than he did. He didn't have a very good job. I think he was a social worker or something. And we went to their house, and they came to our house, and everything seemed to be fine. And I asked her once, "Well, geez, your husband's a lot bigger than you are." She says, "Yeah, that's kind of cool. I met him when I was a freshman in high school, and he was a senior, and he hit me with a volleyball. They were playing volleyball and phys ed or something, and he spiked it right in her face." And she said, "I started crying, and after a while he came over and he apologized for hitting me in the face." Now, what she didn't tell me at that point was that he was over there joking with his friends that he had marked her with void across her face, or whatever. So he was laughing about it, and he was being fairly abusive. He had injured this young lady, and then he came over and he apologized, and because she grew up in a home where the father was in charge, she thought that he was showing her affection. He wasn't showing her affection, he was making fun of her, is what he was doing. So the whole relationship was based on this first incident, this incident where he injured her and then he apologized. He hurt her and then he apologized. Now the funny thing about that relationship, or that wasn't funny, but the interesting thing about that relationship, this is the pattern of behavior that they follow in their relationship. He sent her to Columbus, Mississippi to find a house. She found a really nice house. He came and he didn't like it. So he punished her. And then then he found a house. And it was much better than her house, even though it was not that much, about the same. So that was their pattern of behavior. And she put up with this for about 10 years. Then eventually, of course, I was there for a couple of years. By the time I left, she realized that love or showing affection for somebody had nothing to do with anger or violence. And she left. It wasn't my fault. It was just that I don't know. My wife and I have a really positive relationship. There's no anger, there's no hitting or yelling or anything like that in our family. And she didn't recognize that until she saw us do it. And then the year after I left, she divorced the guy and started dating a guy that actually didn't hit her or didn't yell at her. It wasn't abusive. Interesting. Okay, anyway, so researchers note that humans in depressed or oppressed situations often display the same attitude. Paralysis of will, of course, they can't move. Passive resignation, they just accept whatever happens to them, like my friend. My colleague, this lady was a really dynamic individual, but not at home. At home, and it was worse than that because he was the son of a preacher. So he had God on his side. And he used that. He would say that sometimes. Of course. The other thing about me is that I'm not a religious person. So she was able to reject that idea, that whole idea that you have to do what God tells you to do. Just because, anyway. Passive resignation, motionless apathy, and of course that can be a problem as well. So not only was my friend in a state of learned helplessness, but there's lots of people out there in states of learned helplessness. Unfortunately, learned helplessness may come into play in real-life circumstances. In any institutionalized setting where there is little choice for free will, learned helplessness may be the product. And of course, we see this in the military all the time. One of the reasons I was a medic was because it gave me so much freedom and autonomy. Because when I was doing tests and when I was drawing somebody's blood, there was nobody there telling me what to do. Because we needed to get it done. If this occurs in a hospital or a nursing home setting, the learned helplessness may affect the individual's health or chance for survival. And I saw this all the time. People would come in not so sick. They would become dependent on whatever was happening in the hospital, painkillers or IVs or whatever. And eventually they would just slip into a state of apathy, and eventually they'd die, even though they didn't need to die. And there was not a whole lot you could do about it. You could try to talk them out of it, but usually they didn't hear you. They liked getting their meals cooked by somebody else and getting 3 meals a day. They liked somebody else picking out what was being cooked on that given day. They liked that stuff. And they just kind of slip into a state of apathy, and eventually they die. You can't lay in a hospital bed for an extended length of time. It's debilitating, and of course sometimes they would die. So as a lab tech, I would go up and draw their blood, and I'd try to talk them out of it. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes they would just not listen to anything that I had to say. Hospital patients who are trained to believe that they control stress require fewer pain relievers and sedatives and exhibit less anxiety. And of course, Nursing homes are about the same situation. Where was it? Illinois that they? No, it was Ohio. That they found that guy had rotted to death. That they had taken such poor care of him that he had developed gangrene in select areas of his body, and he actually rotted to death because they did such a poor job of taking care of him. And there were no relatives, of course, to come around and look at him and say, he stinks. They all stink. While having no choices is debilitating, having too many choices, of course, can be equally paralyzing. If you've ever had to buy a car, there's lots of cars out there. What's the right car for you? What's the best car? What color should you get? All of these things can be totally paralyzing. So it may take you an extended length of time to decide what you want. And maybe you will never make a decision because, damn it, your car works fine. It's old and the windows don't roll up, but that's okay. That's fine. Or they don't roll down or whatever. That's okay. I'll put up with that rather than have to make a decision. Some people just cannot make a decision. When you've got this many different types of drinks, which one are you going to get? Does everybody have a favorite? Water? Red Bull?
Depends on what I need.
Oh, you need a little energy
In
today.
the morning, it's going to be coffee or
You
something
need coffee?
caffeinated.
Okay. Well, you're not going to find it in the cold area. What if you were thirsty and it was hot outside? Water?
Powerade.
Powerade? Okay. Red Bull? Anything you want. See, you can't make a decision. What do you want? Water? How boring. Wow. What is it? Vitamin water? Is it good? It's very delicious. Okay. I'll remember very delicious. She's
Wait, no,
making a
no,
decision.
it's fine.
What do you want?
Water.
Water? You guys are so bored.
Sprite.
Sprite, there you go. Okay, there you go. Well, here's the Mountain Dew. I'm a Mountain Dew guy. Yeah, that's it. Now it's 7-Up.
That's a squirt at the bottom. Mountain Dew's in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Right here?
No, behind him.
His arm.
Behind his left
Where's
arm.
Oh, right here. There it is. There's the Mountain Dew. I don't drink the green stuff. I drink the red stuff. Come on in. That's okay.
Is this the sustainability? I think I'm in the wrong way.
What?
Sustainability?
Sustainable. I don't know where that is.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I apologize. I don't know everything. Research also shows that people are more satisfied with their choices when making a choice that is irreversible. In other words, back in the old days, when you couldn't get a divorce, and this was before the 1970s, into the 1960s, it was illegal to get a divorce in the United States. In the 1940s and 1950s, you couldn't get a divorce. Somebody had to die, or somebody had to do something.
Somebody had to die.
Yeah. And I was in that state.
I imagine there's a lot of accidents that happen.
Well, I was hoping that somebody would have an accident, so I wouldn't have, I'd get the kids and I wouldn't have to put up with her. I hope you've never been in that situation, but I was. And I can remember, this is a horrible, horrible thing to think. And she's going to work, and I'm hoping that she has an automobile accident. The thing I was worried about was that we only had one car, and then I wouldn't have a car to go to work. How in the world am I ever going to get the kids? That's what I was worried about, because she couldn't take care of the kids. She can't even take care of herself. How in the world is she going to take care of 2 kids? I was taking care of them anyway. And she was not a very friendly person. I mean, living with somebody that's mean to you or isn't nice to you is hard. They're here in the same bedroom, my God. Well, in our case, there was only 2 bedrooms. Anyway, how do you put up with it? So you wish to be. That's the situation I was in. Eventually, she divorced me, so I was happy. I was so happy when she left. No, I was mad when I first found out. I punched the wall. I punched a hole in the wall. I punched a hole in, and it was a cement wall. Like, that was the stupid thing. It wasn't one of these one of these walls. It was a cement block wall. I punched a hole right through it was haydite. Anyway, it was lighter. It's a lighter block. It's cheaper, so they make them so they're not as heavy. Anyway, so if the situation is irreversible, like if you have an arranged marriage. If it's an arranged marriage, you don't have a choice. You can never divorce the person. You have to stay with them for the rest of your life. And this is the way it was all over the world for an extended length of time. In the United States until the 1960s, the only place you could get a divorce was either Mexico or Reno, Nevada. Nevada, you could get a divorce in Nevada. Las Vegas wasn't there yet, so Reno was a place to go. So people would go to Reno to get a divorce. It's the only way they could separate themselves from somebody else. Back in the 1930s and 1940s, people like Carol Lombard was married 3 times. Well, she had to go to Reno to get a divorce so that she could marry the new guy in her life. And of course, eventually she married Clark Gable, and then she was in an airplane crash and died, but that's not important. So if it's irreversible, then you're more satisfied with it. The possibility of change gives individuals the idea that there may be something better that they didn't try. If you get married when you're 18, 19, how old was I? I was 19 when I got married. If you get married when you're 19, you're pretty damn stupid. And you recognize that when you're 24 years old and you're living with the worst person in the whole wide world. God, what did I ever see in that lady? That's what you ask yourself. That's what I was asking myself. And I'm sure she was asking the same thing. Remember, she said that I was the most boring person she had ever met.
I think getting married at a young age is the smartest thing you can do.
Smartest thing you can do.
Because by the time you figure out that's not the person for you, and you get divorced, you're still young enough to live a life.
To find somebody else. And that's exactly what I did. So the next time I found somebody with a chest, my first wife had no chest whatsoever. I mean, she looked like a little boy. So next time I found somebody with a chest. Well, that was a mistake. It was a military marriage. And then I found my current wife. So now I'm happy. But I was older then. I was 28 years old when I got married to my current wife. So I was married 3 times by the time I was 28. Got married at 19, at 24, and 28. Yeah, 24 and 28. I know.
Mine was-
Third time's a charm.
Third time's a charm.
Mine was 18 and 22.
22, see? Uh-oh. Your brain wasn't still mature,
I
so,
know, but now it is.
okay.
No, 23, sorry. Wait.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're so much older. So your brain is working okay. Most people maintain a self-serving bias or the tendency to perceive themselves favorably. And of course, I'm not going to tell you anything negative about myself and my first wife. I can't think of, and maybe I've just blocked all this out. Maybe I really was the most boring person in the world. That's a possibility. I don't seem like I was, and I was taking care of the kids, and that seemed like a really important thing to do as far as I was concerned. She wanted to drink beer and have a good time. I don't even like beer, which makes me the most boring person in the world. Such ideas allows the individuals to interpret negative events as someone else's fault and positive events that may have happened through chance as due completely to their own positive attributes. So we can assume, and you may be of the opinion that men are always the bad guys and women are always the good guys, especially if you watch the Lifetime channel. Men are always assholes and women are always the victims. I don't know. She's been married 5 times. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Was it a mistake marrying the person that I did? Probably. We had 2 great kids though, so there you go. The genes are really good. Both of my kids were track stars. I don't know where that comes from. Okay. Failures are externally caused while successes are internally caused. So that's part of the self-serving bias as well. And I'm sure I adhere to that as just like everybody else does. Anyway, in one study from Canada, of young married couples, researchers discovered that males felt that they did more housework than their wives gave them credit for. Now the reality is that if you go up to Canada, the Canadians are a little bit different than we are. They drink more than we do because they never went through prohibition. They drink more than we do. The men are just a little bit more machismo than men in the United States tend to be. So it's just a little bit different up there than it is here.
Drinking age is 19 too.
I'm sorry?
Drinking age is 19.
Yeah, and they do. I can assure you. However, at the same time, the wives took credit for more of the housework than they actually performed. This was up in Canada. Each group participated in self-serving bias. The men thought that they did more work, the women thought that they did more work. But unfortunately, of course, this had to do with marital discord, and it caused a lot of problems. I'm sure if I asked everybody in the room, you're going to tell me how much housework that you do in your house. And if we actually divided out the amount of time, you would be inaccurate. It would be fairly inaccurate. It's easy for me because I'm the only one there, so if the floor doesn't get swept or the dishes don't get washed, I know whose fault it is. It is obviously mine. And that has been a bone of contention with me and my wife. My wife was an officer, and so she doesn't like to do housework. And I was enlisted, and theoretically, I'm the one who should be on KP duty like every damn day. But, and this was a point of discord. I called my wife yesterday, and she said that she'll sweep the floor before I get home, because that's one of the things I do when I get home. I always sweep the floor. So she's going to do it before I get home. We'll see what happens. She won't vacuum the rug, though. We've got a long-haired dog that sheds, and so the rug is going to be white by the time I get home. And even though it's red and brown, and well, anyway, it's going to be.
Is it self-serving bias? Is that a defense mechanism?
Yeah. You're trying to think positively of yourself. You need to be as positive as possible. And this is a way that our brains, remember, our brains want to be good, it wants to be level, it wants everything to be balanced. So this is just one of the ways that we keep things balanced. We lie to ourselves. And that's, lying to yourself is okay. As long as it makes you feel better, right? Feeling better is the best thing. I don't have my phone, so I can't tell what time it really is. I'm on Fitbit time, and Fitbit time's like 3 or 4 minutes slow, I think. 18? Okay. Let me do one more slide. Did I miss one? Yeah. Self-serving bias is evident in academia as well. When students do well on an exam, not only was it their hard work that allowed them to do well, congratulations, but the test was a true measure of the material. It was a hard test. You never do well on an easy test. You always do well on a hard test, because that makes you feel better. I really worked hard on that test. When students do poorly, it is usually because of the instructor. However, instructors are just as bad. Successes are due to their ability to teach, and failure is due to a poor student, not the quality of the instruction. So if I was a really shitty instructor, which is a possibility, if I was a really shitty instructor, I wouldn't realize it, because I would be telling myself that I'm this great teacher that never stutters. Marius stuttered in class the other day. He was all upset. He thinks he's having a stroke or something. I said, geez, man, I do it all the time. And I'm perfect, so obviously it's okay. Anyway, that's self-serving bias. Why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time. Right here.